Hi there. I'm here with Paul Adams. He's the managing director of Basilico. Is one of the roles he plays, but wears a lot of hats, I think, from what I can see. We're gonna dig into that. So, Paul, thanks so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Okay, good. So look, let's start off. Let's start off with understanding what you do, what you've done, and just getting a bit of a background to you and business in general.
Yeah, so Basilico itself's been going for 25 years, founded in London by two British guys who loved pizza when they went to Italy and just couldn't get nice delivered pizza when they lived in London. That was the idea of it. So fine if you went to a restaurant, couldn't get it delivered. So they set Basilico up. And it grew and grew, and that's fine. And it's got up to 11 stores now. And then a few years ago, the owner, who's a very old friend of mine, he sales weren't going great. It kind of plateaued. He wasn't quite sure what was happening. And after a couple of years of that, he asked me to come in. Now, my background's tech startup, advising government on how to spin out companies. I've taught startups. So although I had no food background and no franchise background, I had a wide-ranging business background. So he just thought it was that case of bring somebody else in who's got a completely new look on it. And I come in and I said, well, I think this is what's going wrong. And I came up with a strategy to fix it. And he said, well, why don't you become the MD? Because basically the strategy won't happen properly unless the person who thought of it implemented, which is good advice. So I became the MD 3 months before COVID hit. So that's interesting. So I've now been in this food business 4 years, and I don't think I've seen what is a normal year. I'm not quite sure what a normal year is so far, but we have turned it around. It's finally profitable after 25 years of not really making any money. It is now finally profitable. So we're obviously doing something right.
Okay, well that's great. So in terms of in terms of franchise, it's really interesting you mentioned. So Basilico is kind of your first entry really into working with a franchise business or franchise company. You have so much experience in business in general. What have you seen as the key differences in a franchise business versus just an independent or normal kind of business, if you like?
Yeah. Well, probably the key thing, if you start with the similarities first, which is business, I feel is ultimately all about people in some way. It's about your staff, it's about your customers. So everything in business really is about people. There's very few businesses which don't involve some sort of people. You're managing staff, you're managing customers. So what's consistent is that people are complicated and frankly a bit of a pain in the ass for most of the time, particularly staff. There's just always something going on. And franchising is no different. The fact that we're legally franchisor and franchisee rather than employer and stuff doesn't actually matter. When someone's having personal problems and they're having issues, it affects their franchise as much as it affects their performance if they're an employee. So you have to think about people as a whole. What I think is perhaps a bit different is that the franchisee is usually more motivated, requires less hands-on kind of, because they've got a vested interest in making it successful. But equally, the dark side of that is that their interests are not always aligned with your interests, and they don't necessarily always want to do what you want them to do. And in theory, I can order them to do whatever the hell I like. But in reality, unless they've mentally kind of bought into what I'm trying to get them to do, unless they understand that it's important, there's all sorts of ways to kind of passively resist or go slow and do things. So it comes back, I say, it's more what struck me more is the similarities than the differences, which is it's all about people, regardless of the legal framework. It's trying to get people to buy into what you're trying to do and trying to lead them to change, particularly with what I've done with Basilico, which a lot of it has been about trying to change things that we've done to a new way of doing things. And change management's always hard in any business, no matter what the legal structure is.
Yeah, no, Paul, that's an interesting take on it. I don't know if I've always looked at it that way, but it's an interesting way to look at it. And really, you say it comes down to people. I think you're absolutely right. And it's the communication between two parties or multiple parties that that becomes the key to success, I think. And because just like an employer can misunderstand employees or not understand employees, the same goes for a franchisor and franchisees. And I think the key difference is a franchisee is a partner in some sense of the word, in that they've signed a 5, 10, 15-year agreement to work with the franchisor, and employees on a different kind of a contract, and the motivations are different. You're absolutely right. And it can be difficult to get rid of either one. And it can be also difficult to make either one work effectively. And to me, that all comes down to communication. And so Paul, in terms of that, what kind of structures with Basilico have you helped to put in place or implement to ensure that there is, good communication, clear communication between, the franchisees and the franchisor?
Well, one practical thing is just having more regular franchisee meetings where they all get around the table and talk to us, because there's nothing replaces that face-to-face. I can sit here and email all day, but that kind of face-to-face contact. And also me physically going in and seeing the stores myself. So I live in the Midlands in England, but I spend every other week in London. All our stores are in London. And I just spend the whole week just going around visiting different stores and just getting a sense of it, speaking to them. So that's something we did more. We did it before I got involved, but we did more of it. I think the other thing I've put in place is more systems to understand who's performing and who's not performing. And basically that's better rating systems, not occasional mystery shops, but using rating systems from people like Deliveroo and using them as a benchmark to measure them by. And the reason I mentioned Deliveroo is on Deliveroo, every order is rated. Every customer, when they come back into Deliveroo, say, what did you think of the order? Which is a far better sample size than I can ever get by sending surveys myself. So even though it's only Deliveroo, I know they make the same pizzas for Deliveroo as Direct, as for Uber. So I'm using that, and I've structured that, and that's now built in that they get an update. And a league table showing who's doing well and who's doing not, because it's very easy to get a bit complacent and think, well, I'm doing okay. But when you realize everyone else is at a higher rating than you, that comes through. We put in more monitoring of ingredients and making sure they're buying the right ingredients. So rather than sampling and spot checks, more systems to say, this is how many kilos of mozzarella you should have bought last month, and you didn't buy that many. So what's going on? So there's more structure. And what I've tried to do is make it less personal. So it's not me saying, I think you make terrible pizzas, and I don't like it. It's, this is your rating on Deliveroo, and that's based on 1,000 orders in the last couple of months, and they rate you this. And when you look at the reviews and they say what they didn't like, these 3 things just keep coming up again and again and again. So it's not me saying it, it's making the data talk for it. And again, with the ingredients, saying, well, I think you're cheating on ingredients or not using the right cheese. It's, you bought this many kilos, and according to the recipe, you should have used this many kilos, and there's a difference. So what is it? So I think that's it. That's really important, because that, I say, makes it less antagonistic and makes it more, we need to sit around and solve this problem, but I'm telling you it is a problem, and we need to sit down and work together. So I think that's one change I've tried to do. The other thing, which you'd have to ask the franchisees whether this worked or not, but trying to give a sense of purpose and direction and doing something different, rather than it always being the same old, same old. I mean, I took over a business which had been going doing the same thing for 20 years. So I have described Basilico as a 25-year-old startup, because everything I'm doing is new and for the first time. But I've got legacy systems like you wouldn't believe, like 20 years of doing things a certain way, which, makes it hard, because I can't just order things to happen. These things get implemented by human beings. Unless they buy into why we're doing it, it won't happen. So those, I think, are a new look at it, and we can do things differently and better. But also, the other thing I've tried to bring in is more systems to take the personality out of any tension. It's, here are the stats. You can tell me the stats are wrong, or explain why the stats are, but these are the statistics, and we need to do something about it. So that's what I've tried to do anyway.
No, I think there's a great tip in there, I think, for franchisors, Paul, especially in this sector, to yeah, go on the ratings that the customers give to the franchisees, and use that as the kind of a proxy to have meetings and conversations to help them improve their business. I think that's I think that's pretty sound advice there. And Paul, I wanted to go back a little bit, and before you became involved with Basilico, which was your, as you say, your first kind of foray into franchising, you know, directly. You've worked with a lot of startup companies, businesses, and from that, and you've been involved working with entrepreneurs, that whole entrepreneurial side of things. What would you say in working with all of those businesses prior? What do you think businesses need to have to be able to consider franchising as a growth strategy? Because there's lots of growth strategies, but you know franchising now, and if you just thinking back to all of your involvement in all these other kinds of businesses and business owners, what are the key things that you think must be in place before they could take that step and actually go down that road of franchising their business?
I think, well, a couple of things. I mean, basically, they need to be very sure of their product. I think it's a mistake that startups make, which is trying to expand too fast. You know, we're doing well. Let's raise funding and expand into Europe. And the equivalent for franchises is, well, we've managed to do one store right, so let's now franchise. Because, yeah, we've got one store right. Without thinking, well, have we really got it right? Is there something special about this store? You know, so to be really solid before you go out is good advice to any startup, no matter what the expansion is. But one really good bit of business advice I read, it was in the book called The E-Myth, at least 10, 15, 20 years ago. Yeah, was make your business like it's going to be franchised. In other words, systematize everything, have everything written down, even if it's just you, but, you know, and you're writing a memo to yourself as the marketing manager. You know, it's the idea that everything is systematized as if you're going to franchise, because the very discipline of putting it all into systems is just good business sense anyway. So obviously that applies even more if you genuinely are trying to go into franchising. If what you've got is so special that it relies on a particular chef with a particular flair for doing what he's doing, she, or you know, if it only works if you've got a really good customer service person or something, franchising might not be the route, because this has to be something that will work with just average people. Yeah, everyone wants to hire the best, but you can never guarantee you're going to hire the best. So what you've got to do is create something that works with just normal people, that doesn't require flair. Because if it requires flair, franchising might not be the route. You might want to expand in a different way. So it has to be really simple, that an average person can make it run. Hopefully you'll get better than average, but if it works okay with an average person, then it's going to fly with a better than average person. That would be my observation, having seen it.
And Paul, knowing what you know now about franchising, if you could have that, you know, if you could go back as your former self in all those years working with startups and entrepreneurs and business owners, do you think that you would have introduced the concept of franchising to a lot more of them, knowing what you know now, or not?
I think for some of them, yeah. For some of the businesses, it wasn't suitable. They were, you know, a SaaS product, a B2B product. It wouldn't necessarily work. But yeah, there's definitely businesses that they're looking back, franchising would have been, because I mean, there's a reason why franchising is so successful. It's a really good, when it works well, it's really good for expanding. You get access to money far quicker because you're putting in other people's credit ratings. They're all borrowing money to expand. It's a great business model for certain businesses, and it's making sure that you've got the right business. What I would say is I don't even have to go back to before I joined. Now I've experienced franchising more. There's things I do differently, even with my time in Basilico, having now gone through it. I mean, one is to recognise early on that someone isn't the right fit. That no matter how much you try, they are not going to buy into what you're doing. And if they're damaging the brand and not doing it right, you can give them a certain amount of leeway, but at a certain point, you need to let the person go, whether it's an employee or a franchisee, because if they're just not willing to do it, there's only so many times you can ask them to do it. And I think, in retrospect, I held on a bit too long with some people that probably should have gone earlier. And I think maybe now recognizing how franchises have to work, I think that it's a good thing to do, not just for the business as a whole, but actually it's good for the other franchisees. Not because, to encourage the others, I'm going to get rid of this guy. I mean, there's an element to that, but it's equally, it values that what they're doing matters and doing it right matters. Because if you're in a group of franchisees and there's one or two who are just always doing it wrong, terrible ratings, never improve, don't seem to care, there's a temptation for you to ease up and just think, well, what does it matter? They do nothing and they get the franchisor lets them get away with it. But again, all this is applicable to managing staff and managing people who aren't performing staff. So it comes back to my earlier point about it's all about people, no matter what the legal framework is. It's all about managing people and trying to get them to do what you need them to do.
Yeah, and Paul, yeah, I guess what you're talking about there is the right way to end a relationship and the right timing to end a relationship is. But what I also want to ask you is how do you choose to start or not start a relationship in the first place? And let's use Basilico as an example. So in a franchising context, because that's obviously a good way to avoid getting to the point where you need to end a relationship earlier than you had hoped. And so what kind of things have you put in place to try and find the right people in the first place?
It's we've tried advertising, we've tried personal recommendations, we've done shows, all different approaches. What we find is the best indicator of someone going to be good is their background, what they've done before. And that's partly what they've done before, have they got a food background, but it's also just in whatever field of life they've been in, have they shown the kind of qualities you need to be able to put in the hours and grind away and grow something. So I do more than before, I spend more time speaking to people to find out what their background is, what they've done previously. And like I said, I'm not necessarily looking for have they made pizzas, well, that's obviously great. But what have you done? Why do you want to do a franchise now? Because there's a lot of wannabe entrepreneurs who, they've got a job now. I want to be my own boss, so they buy a franchise, but they don't realise just how hard work it is to run your own business, whether a franchise or anything. All the pressure's on you. You're the boss. If you don't make money that week, then you don't get paid. That's your problem. And are they ready for that? And if they are, great, we'd love to work with them. But they need to recognise that it's a different sort of pressure to just being an employee. So, and that's working better. We're finding people who've actually kind of got what it takes, and our ratings are improving all over the place. It's going well now. So yeah, that would be my learning.
Okay, no, thanks, Paul. Tell me about Basilico. What's the vision for the UK? I mean, you're mostly based around the Greater London area. What are your expansion plans looking ahead?
Yeah, so we've consciously decided we want to get London right first. We've created a suite of different virtual pizza brands, and that was one of the things in this strategy I suggested to the owner a few years ago. Was that pizza is the perfect food to create a virtual brand, because it's you can create any cuisine. You can have traditional Italian, you can have quirky, you can have halal, you can have meat, you can whatever you want. Pizza has more combinations than basically any other fast food you can think of. There's only so many ways you can do a burger. What can you do? But you can completely change it. So one is to create virtual brands which appeal to different segments that we weren't reaching. So one of the things we noticed with Basilico is we only reached a certain premium section of the market, so maybe we would do other things. And then we wanted to get the operations much slicker with what we already had. Going back to this lesson I've learned about, running before you're ready. So we've been doing that, buffeted by COVID and then Ukraine war and then Liz Truss's budget, so all these things derailing us, but we're now feeling much better. In terms of expanding, what we'd like to do, we think there's a gap in the pizza market for a premium, really nice delivered pizza that tastes like pizza you get when you go on holiday in Italy. And it's not in every town in the UK, but our shorthand is if it has an M&S food hall or a Waitrose, there's probably enough customers for our brand in that town. So we're never going to be national as in every single town has one, but we would at some stage, I think, like to be in between 50 to 100 places. I'm thinking of places like Bath, Bristol, places where there'd be enough of our sort of customers to sustain a franchise. So that's the vision, to be a national chain, but in selected spots, not a Domino's 2,000 outlets across the UK, not that kind of model.
Okay, thanks, Paul. And anyone listening who might know someone or be interested in looking at the Basilico model, where's the best place for them to find out a little bit more about it?
So just obviously go to the Basilico website itself. There's a contact us button about franchising on there. But be honest, I'd say the first thing is actually go into London next time you're in London and order one of our pizzas. And if you bite into it and say, this is the nicest pizza I've ever had, then you're in the right place. Because that's how I got involved. Because my friend asked me to get involved in that. I'd heard, because we know each other, but I don't live in London, so I've never tasted the pizza. And he said, oh, go into London and try the pizza. And my wife, who's a big foodie, loves Italy, speaks Italian. We go to Italy on holiday every year. And we went together and we bought the pizza. And she said, this is as good as they make in Italy, which to her was the highest praise you could ever give any food. So that would be my suggested first. If anyone's interested, go into it and taste it. And if you think, this is the best pizza I've ever tasted, I'd like to be involved, then you're the sort of person we're looking for.
Right. Well, Paul, I love pizza, right? So I used to live on the French, Italian, Swiss border in Chamonix, and we used to go through the tunnel to Italy, skiing and whatever, and we always grabbed pizza there, and the pizza was like unbelievable and totally different to what you get in France or anywhere else. And we make our own pizzas at home and things like that because we live quite rurally, and we do a pretty decent job, but we don't often go out and order pizza because we just don't find it's good enough. And so I'm gonna, next time I'm in London, which won't be too long away, I'm gonna go and seek out a Basilico and do exactly what you've just suggested there, Paul. So yeah, I'll do that, and I'll feed back. I'll send you a text and let you know.
Please do.
Yeah, I'll do that. So Paul, just lastly, what I wanted to ask you is apart from the systemization of a business, which I think is a really brilliant point to make, whether you're going to franchise your business or whether you're not, and just good business practice creates systemization around everything that you do. But over and above that, what would you say to a business owner that's listening to this? They've got a successful business already, right? So they're not a true startup. They've had 1, 2, 3 years of trading, and they are at that point where they are profitable, they are successful, and they're looking to grow. And franchising is one of the options. What should their next steps be before actually going down that and starting that journey?
I think I'd analyze their own business a lot. When I first got into Basilico, we didn't know what percentage of our customers really were regular customers or not at a granular level. All we knew is have they bought before or not bought before. but that didn't tell us whether they were regulars, just told us whether they bought twice or more. We didn't have an understanding of the demographic. So we discovered when I analysed it that we sold to almost nobody with small children. And I think that's because our toppings are basically too fancy. And anyone who's got small kids knows that, you know, it's going to be plain and simple. So there was a whole bunch of things we understood much better after initial. And even now, I'm just learning all the time, you know, about what's the conversion rate from casual customers to regular customers. There's a whole bunch of things, because I think if you understand that, you understand where you would naturally go to expand and how that will go. Because if you've got one store, you've only got a sample size of one about how you've done it. So you don't know, if I translate that to another time, will that work? And what you don't want to do is get off to a bad start. I have advised the franchise, which came from overseas, to come to this country. And they told me the areas they're going to open in. And I said, for your brand, that's appalling. It's just, it'll go so badly wrong. They ignored me. They set it up anyway, and it went badly wrong. Nothing wrong with the product, nothing particularly wrong with the area, but there was no fit between the two. So yeah, I think if you've got a successful, you know, shop somewhere, you've got a successful model, this is really good, I want to expand now. Really make sure you understand why you're doing well at the minute, not just the pounds in the sales, but understand who's your demographic here, and then make sure that when you do franchise, you're trying to replicate that success in a analytical way, rather than just this. I think that time would be good for us, because it's very easy to get those. You know, you drive down a high street, you look around and say, yeah, this looks like my sort of town, and it's didn't tell you anything about the demographic, the surrounding area, the customer base. You know, you need to really understand why yours is successful, and then try and replicate that in other locations. That would be my advice. Know yourself.
Yeah, great, Paul. That's great. That's great advice. And the very last thing, which is away from franchising, I'm keen to understand Goldfish Ventures, right? What is that? What do you do? What's that all about? It's obviously different to franchising, but tell me about that, because I was just really interested in seeing what you did.
This was a business that I set up with some guys I've met at Virgin when I was working at Virgin, and it was to advise companies who wanted to set up new ventures how to do it, because they're full of people who've never started a business. And I have seen multiple times how the skill set you need for one just does not translate to the other. So it's a kind of side consultancy business that, you know, when projects come up, it can be put under that banner or not. But it was come back to my knowledge of having worked for big organizations, but also startups. I saw that there was a gap there in advising big companies. I mean, one of my jobs was head of commercial development at the Environment Agency, which is helping them spin out companies. Well, the Environment Agency is full of wonderful, dedicated people, but not one of them has ever really thought about starting their own business, I would say. So setting up a new business was very alien to them. And I've seen that now in multiple cases. So that was the idea, that you go in as advisors and help people start a business, get it up and running, and get them that first customer. And then it's more in their comfort zone of what it's a steady state thing that they know what to do with now. But getting that first customer, that's the tricky bit.
Good. All right. Well, that's I will follow with interest, Paul, at what happens there. And well, listen, I mean, thanks so much for coming on today. And I hope to bump into you in a franchising sense, and somewhere online or at an event or in the future. Yeah. So, but really appreciate your time for today, Paul.
No problem. Enjoy the pizza when you finally get to London.
I will. I promise you. I will text you and I'll let you know. So, all right.